edition of the Lawyer Henderson podcast show is very simple. No reparations, no vote. And Lawyer Henderson is live. No reparations, no vote. The Henderson podcast show is on live. Good evening. Thank you for joining me. Reparations, no vote. No reparations, no vote. Thumbs up, like, share, a special edition of the Lawyers Podcast Show. No reparations, no vote. No reparations, no vote. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, well, I should say black folks, we got to have a discussion. Okay. White people is in the house. White people, welcome. But we next year are going to be electing a new president. And Jim Crow Joe, let's just get right into it. Jim Crow Joe said, I'm running for re-election. Jim Crow Joe had the audacity after he got finished falling off bikes, falling down at some commencement award ceremony for the American troops. This man still says he's going to run for re-election. Isn't that something? Now, let's go back because, see, this is what we have to understand when black people vote. Now, listen, I am going to do you a favor to give you an analysis about what the other content black creators are saying. Most of us in 2020 election did not vote are in the election. You got almost 46 people, or I should say 43, 44 million black people in America. We have to look at the numbers of black people who voted in the last election. It was only about 17 million black people voted in America in 2020. Okay. And so out of the 17 million black people who voted, let's get it very clear that Jim Crow Joe got 87% or 85 or 87% of those votes of black people. He did not have the vast majority of black men support. Let's be very, very clear. And this is why YouTube don't like to give me subscribers. They like to take away my subscribers because they know that I'm going to come over here and tell the truth. Out of the 75% or 78% of black people who voted for Jim Crow Joe, which is within that 17 million black votes, we have to recognize what happened to the voting bloc of the other black people who voted for a Republican like Donald Trump or an independent or else. Remind you that the vast majority of black people did not vote in 2020. Okay? Now, let's talk about now where we are now headed for next year. But before we go into that, thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. We're going to be basically talking today about no vote, no reparations. It's just that simple. But I want to talk about how we got here. Remember, we voted for Jim Crow Joe, okay? And during his campaign, let's rehash because we have to go back there. Jim Crow Joe said, I support, he told former BET host Torre, he would support a study or a commission on reparations if it includes Native Americans. Remember? Okay. Y'all remember? Now, and then his vice president, who lost her own election, was selected by Jim Crow Joe. And she did an interview that said, I'm not going to sit up here and say I'm going to do something specifically that only benefits Black folks. No. Okay. Now, we get into their terms in office. And Jim Crow Joe starts to basically roll back and peel back a lot of policies and start inflicting policies against Black people. He stopped the construction of the wall and to keep these illegal immigrants, in which I promised you that we were going to talk about when I came on next, but it's definitely on the way. So I am working on that, but I wanted to break down specifically what other people basically is also talking about as far as the immigrants, and to also put that into our no reparations, no vote campaign, okay, that we're launching for 2024, where Black folks, specifically Black men, we're staying home, we're not voting, or some of us will vote for Donald Trump 2024. Now, we're going to talk about that specifically, that Obama, of course, his predecessor, when Obama was in office and Jim made a lot of policies that benefited everybody but Black folks. Remember, I told you that when Obama was in office, this was the second phase of Reconstruction, okay? That when he did executive orders basically for DACA and other types of situations for other races of people, and that he did not do anything for Black people, we basically covered that in the Black media. We covered that on a Black grassroots, okay? And so Black people really are not supporting Joe Biden. In fact, if you look at it, every time that Joe Biden speaks, he doesn't go to rallies. Notice that he doesn't set up rallies of his own, because he knows that he's not going to have a lot of Black people there, okay? So I want to bring a different perspective to it, okay, than my colleagues as far as the Black grassroots bring. In addition to that, you know why he only speaks at historically Black colleges? Because despite the fact that he basically reduced their money to $2 billion, he basically gave them money and have to do a smoke screen in order to make it appear that he got Black folks' support. He does not. Half of Black people, but majority of Black men, do not want Joe Biden in office to be running again. Specifically, we don't want him there, okay? It's okay if we have a Republican like Donald Trump in office. It's okay. But we are rehashing and going back as to why we don't need to vote for the Democrats. We don't need to basically just worry about and focus on going to the polls. Now, of course, they're going to inundate you with all kinds of advertisement in the mail. They're going to lie talking about, oh, you're voting to save democracy and all this old stuff. Listen, you're not voting to save nothing. You're voting to basically help other people, other groups, illegal immigrants, and others who are not citizens. That's what you're doing. Well, you have a lot of Black people say, well, my Jesus want me to vote as far as my heart leads me to, okay? Yes, it is going to be the ideal of your Jesus and your God or whatever, and I'm not trying to make fun of your religion, who is going to cause you to be broke and enslaved. But let me just focus here on some things here about the 2024 election that I want to talk to you about regarding of our other discussion on when we talked there about the BRICS nations and how they're basically shutting the United States out of the global economic system. This was their opportunity to do that based upon the fact of having a weak and a dangerous, however, administration in office like Joe Biden, who's financed by George Soros and these other white supremacists and elites in this country. I want to also talk about what we must do as Black people to focus now away from politics in order to build our financial and economic system and goals. Okay? And before I do that, I want to talk about an article that was written on January 28, 2023. And the article was printed by Jacobin.com. I think that's how you pronounce the newspaper or the online newspaper's name. And we're going back to everything that we said was true about Joe Biden and how he has basically done away with actually, I won't say done away, but how he has specifically ignored Black people and has harmed us with more policies than Donald Trump and other Republicans, even though Republicans don't like us either. And let me be very clear that I'm not a Republican. I'm a Black man who is fighting for justice for Black people in economics, in business, and also trying to build my own business myself. But a writer by the name of Branko Marcetic wrote an article for this magazine, Jacobin.com. And he says at the beginning that Joe Biden has built a career on betraying Black voters. The article goes on to say that an underwhelming start for Joe Biden's campaign in February seems to mark it as a dead in water. Now he's back, and it's a large part thanks to African-American voters. After the big South Carolina win on the back of strong Black support revived his campaign, Biden solidified his place as the front runner through a series of wins in southern states on Super Tuesday, with mostly older African Americans in those states backing him in large numbers. He's talking about and referring to the old civil rights generation. Biden has carefully cultivated loyal Democratic voters in the Black community, both in this campaign and throughout his decades in Washington. My entire life, I've been involved with Black community, he said during the last debate. My entire career has been wrapped up in dealing with civil rights and civil liberties. But surviving Biden's record, one has left with a different impression that Biden has, in fact, built a career on the back of the steadfast African-American support while consistently portraying those same voters. And let me stop right there because that's the first introduction of that article. That article is true because the title of this article is called Joe Biden has built a career on betraying Black votes, or Black voters rather. Joe Biden, just like a lot of liberal Democrats, if you look at the history of the Democratic Party, the Democrats have been the ones who basically have done the worst to Black people, have set up the most dangerous policies that has inflicted and affected Black folks. and has been the real reason why Black people are in the same conditions that they're in today. But I want to skip over to talk about something that Joe Biden not only has done after passing legislation and passing other things that has harmed Black people. I want to talk about something here on page 4 of the article that was very important that I thought that we should also go about when we talk about Joe Biden's history of betraying us. And I quote, then there's Biden's infamous 2003 eulogy of segregationist and sexual predator Strom Thurmond, the man with whom Biden had worked to shift the U.S. criminal code in a more punitive, unforgiving direction. Today, Biden's South Carolina eulogy is viewed as an uncomfortable relic of less enlightened era. In reality, it was unusual even then. Not only was Biden one of the only 2 Democrats to show up to the funeral, the others, Fritz Hollings, had served with Thurmond for 36 years in the state. He was one of the mere 7 of 225 living former and sitting senators to do so. Thurmond, who has famously filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act into oblivion, was a brave man whose lasting impact was a gift to us all, Biden told attendees. There's not a mention of Biden's long history of taking aim at the entitlements like Social Security, a program enormously important to African Americans, in which large numbers of Black Americans rely on to survive. Now, this is where the articles gets kind of janky because I don't want to get in to talk about Social Security, Medicare, and all this stuff that these white politicians talk about, okay? That's not the point. The point is that we are owed reparations. For 465 years of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, things of that nature, we don't have time to go and back and forth arguing with white folks about our history when it comes to slavery and when it comes to Jim Crow, when it comes to Black codes. And the fact that we put Democrats in office so that only they can turn around and betray us and then go help other groups shows you that the mind of Black people. I think, though, that I have more hope for the younger generation, the Black millennials and the Gen X's, than I do the old civil rights generation. I think it's going to be the youth, the Black youth, who deal with this in a different way. And not only have our ancestors deal with it during slavery or the civil rights generation has dealt with when it comes to their abuse and their inflicting pain upon us. It's safe to say, though, that we have called out not only white supremacists, but white folks in general for their disregard to our economic problems and conditions in America. We also talked about any type of bills that needs to be passed, such as the George Floyd Act and other types of hate crime bills that we need as Black people to protect us. And as the FBI's reports have suggested, that Black people are harmed specifically by these white supremacists than any other group. We looked and saw Asians get a hate crime bill. And we looked to see that Joe Biden and Obama has done nothing to help Black people. So the support among Black men, particularly, has basically declined in voting for the Democratic Party. And this is why they needed the white media to come out and suggest that Black people overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden and the Democrats. which cannot be more further from the truth. We also must understand that Joe Biden is too old to run for president, and that nobody in the Black community really is supporting him, like the white media and other Black content creators are suggesting. In fact, as I've talked to Black people about this, they are not enthusiastic about Joe Biden running again. They're definitely not enthusiastic about voting for a Republican either, but suggest that we should do a protest vote if Donald Trump get into our elected. Some Black men says that either they will stay home or they will vote for Donald Trump. I want to also talk there about another article on PBS NewsHour that was on January the 7th, 2023. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Our special edition of the Lawyer Henderson podcast show is going to dive right into it here. Okay? And this article was written on January 28, 2022. And so we're going to go back to see about really what really happened and how did Jim Crow Joe Biden really win. I don't think that he had overwhelming support of Black voters. I think that was just exaggerated, as me and my friends always talked about when we're talking about politics. We said, well, a lot of Black men, we stayed home. We didn't vote at all, or something like that. Or we didn't, or some Black men would say that they voted for Trump. Now, the reality, we're seeing a lot of other people waking up, and they're doing even podcasts on YouTube and other platforms saying that they are going to vote for Donald Trump or do a protest vote. And there, of course, we have the Black grassroots who are saying no reparations, no vote. But back to this article. Okay, thumbs up, thumbs up. You got me here for a while. It says at the beginning, as he struggled to survive the 2020 Democratic primary. Now, this is before Jim Crow Joe got elected. Joe Biden made a striking pledge before voting began in heavily African American must win South Carolina. His first Supreme Court appointment would be a Black woman. Okay, now he picked this little Black woman. Of course, as you know, every Black person who's in these high positions, they have to have a white spouse. Ketanji Brown and what's this man named Clarence Thomas. White woman, white man. This is how white folks do it. Their trickery is just going to continue. But anyway, the article goes on to say, on Thursday, with his poll numbers reaching new lows and his party picnicking about the midterms election, Biden turned against the Democratic Party's most steadfast voters and reiterated his vow to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer with the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. Now, these is what we're calling at the beginning that we should have known in the mistakes that we made is to watch out for the Democrats' symbolic gestures, okay? It goes on to say that the striking promise is a reflection of Black women's critical role in the Democratic Party and the growing influence of Black women in society. It is also a recognition that Black women have been marginalized in American politics for centuries, and the time has come to right to imbalance that the court made up entirely of white men for almost 2 centuries. A change Biden said Thursday is long overdue. End quote. Black women are most loyal Democrats. 93% of them voted for Biden in 2020 presidential election, according to the Associated Press and VoteCast, a national survey of the electorate. And it's Black women reliability as the Democratic voters that makes it so important for the party to respond to their priorities and to keep them in the fold, says Nadia Brown, a professor of government of Georgetown University. Democrats know black women are going to turn out for them, so they have everything to lose if they don't do it. This is what Ms. Brown is saying. Black women turn out to vote for Biden in greater numbers than for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And they were vital to Biden's win in the states like Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I think Georgia is going to go back red next voting block, if you will, though. Overall, they made up a 12% of Biden's voters and reached even higher percentage in the heavily African-American states like Georgia, where they represented 35% of his support. And that state, which Biden won by just over 12,000 votes, he earned the backing of 95% of black women. Biden in particularly owes black voters, especially women, a debt from the primaries. His campaign was a life support before South Carolina's primary in late February 2020, when he secured the endorsement of Representative James Clyburn, the kingmaker of the state Democratic political orbit, by pledging to select a black woman to the Supreme Court. And you remember that interview where Clyburn was saying, "I don't want nothing. I don't want no reparations, no money. I don't want nothing." And y'all remember Clyburn's 2040 something program he was talking about down there. And what is Dingo Bango's Clyburn talking about, man, when he talked about this 2040-60 plan or whatever he was saying, man? It was hilarious. It was ridiculous, you know. And it goes on here to say, though, that his campaign was struggling. Clyburn recalled on Thursday, citing Biden's 3 straight losses in the early voting states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. This was quite frankly do or die for him, and I urge him to come out publicly to putting an African-American woman on the Supreme Court, end quote. So this is what they've been talking about. They've been talking about specifically continue to split black women up with black men and trying to convince them that they are an island and an entity to themselves. And this is what they have been doing. And this is what they do to other countries now, who basically now has finally, because of the younger people coming out of those countries now, especially in Africa specifically, who is waking up to what their parents was taken from these white supremacists. And now they are forming the BRICS nations. Nations now that is not going to use the American dollar as currency anymore. That's a problem if you're going to keep Biden in office. Biden was the reason why the changing of the world is happening. With his support in the continuous fight of Ukraine, his sanctions against Russia, and other types of things, to fast forward. And so now, as we talked about how we got to this point where the white media continues to say that black people are out here in droves, voting for Joe Biden and voting for the Democratic Party. Not really. Okay, I would argue that voting itself has been steadily declining among black people going out to vote. In fact, during the 1970s and 80s, black people voted 90% in mostly all elections, including not only the general elections and the primaries or whatever, they were also heavily involved in local politics, where they were voting for the local mayors and voting for other types of county and statewide elections and stuff. That has basically dramatically decreased among black people. This is then a reason why the Democrats is going to try to form a different alliance and to try to flood the gates with illegal immigrants, as I told you and promised you that we're going to basically talk about that and how they're trying to replace Black people with these illegal immigrants, starting with Chicago. You have the Hispanics, of course, who have already taken over Los Angeles and Compton and all these other parts that, Black people once stayed in. You see, calling themselves the new Negro. See, and one thing that I was going to make a point about when we talk there about these illegal immigrants and these other Hispanics and Latinos, remember, they're putting them in major cities because people in these other groups, just like white folks, they cannot basically go and stay way out somewhere and get support with themselves in these rural areas without having to come back to the city for a major support when it comes to a job or finances and other things. That's the reason why the first time when they come over here, they suggest to these illegal immigrants to go to the major cities where Black folks are. 9 times out of 10, you can also get a job, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to make sure that they try to cut in front of Black folks and utilize the services that was, provided for American citizens. And this is what they're doing. And like I said, when we talk about this subject, I'm going to show you a map, of course, where they have basically dropped these people off. The governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, he ain't playing. He's sending them out of here. He got out there in Texas just busing them to Chicago and other places. He don't want them there. Governor Abbott, he's like, nah, these illegal immigrants got to go somewhere else. And the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is making it illegal to even have these folks working in Florida jobs. So there has been somewhat of push from these Republicans, but I don't think that Republicans are really against illegal immigration. I just think that they're trying to get back in office. And so here's the thing. The article is very important here that I read here, but I want to talk one more because it gets into his vice president, Kamala Harris. And this is at the beginning, reminds you, it's in 2022, where this article reads, and I quote, Biden already made a fundamentally important statement about the importance of Black women in his coalition by selecting Kamala Harris as his vice president. But putting a Black woman on the court of another historic step, Republican Ronald Reagan, in his 1989 presidential campaign, vowed to put the first woman on the Supreme Court and nominated Justice Sarah Day O'Connor once in office, you see. So we have what the Democrats are calling what they have done for Black people, but everything that they do, they're talking about jobs, giving appointments out to Black folks and symbolic gestures. And that's something that Black people continue to mistake it for real, actual policies, financial policies that affect us when it comes to American politics. You see, as the younger generation start to rise and the Black grassroots start to rise, we're putting an end to the Democrats and their benign neglect policy by doing protest vote. Let's say if Trump get back in office, which I think he is, let's say that we really look at the Democratic Party, because see, the white media is actually on it. It doesn't matter who the Democrat chooses. The white media is going to support them, regardless of how bad they are. And it was very interesting at this town hall meeting that CNN put on a few weeks ago was basically filled with Trump supporters who want to see him back in office. Okay. And I have no problem with putting Trump back in office. In fact, me and other Black men, we're growing to basically say, well, this country can be ran by a Republican for the next 16 years for all we care. Okay. Because as we pointed out in the Black Grassroots, Black people do very well under pressure. They don't do very well when it comes to being tricked by these Democrats and these white liberals. And that these white Jewish people are also behind everything as well. Don't you know that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have just now introduced a so-called hate bill for the Jews? And Black people, according to the FBI, is the most, they basically get harm, as I said earlier, than any other group, you see. And this is the Democrats' history of violence, their neglect against their Black voting bloc that has been putting them in office. That's coming to an end here. We as Black men, of course, are waking up to this system of not only white supremacy, but this system that continues to ignore us, and yet we go out and vote. Now, of course, they're going to inundate you with a lot of newspaper. That's what they did in 2020. They had to flood our mailboxes. They were knocking all on my doors and other neighbor stores, talking about, yeah, go out and vote Democrats and go out and blah, blah, blah. And they sent out these surveys talking about, we haven't seen you vote in 6 years. Why have you not vote? Well, hell, you ain't gave me a reason to go out and vote for your ass, But they basically was inundating us with all of these news, these articles and these, these pamphlets, and saying, hey, go out and vote, because they know that Black people and the rest of the people was just not feeling politics in 2020. They were just not really feeling it. They was not really wanting to go to the polls and vote. So the white media came out claiming, oh yeah, Black folks heavily voted for Joe Biden. Listen, Joe Biden only got 4,000 votes over to win electoral college. He really is a unpopular president, okay? And he really didn't win the popular vote. I don't think he did. And of course, it's me and other Black men that we set into barbershops and hang out and drink a beer or something, or a wine cooler or whatever. We talked about politics a little bit and basically know that, hey, we're just not feeling the Democratic parties, okay? Do that means that we're turning to Republicans? No. It just means that we're going to be independent voters. We're going to independently think about who we should elect if we go into the polls to vote. So nobody is really aspiring. And this is the reason why you got white people in office that's been in office. You go and look at how old white folks are in your local Senate and your local House of Representatives. Then you see them in Congress and see them in Senate. Look at them. Mostly all of them are over the age of 60. I would say 55. Okay, let's say 55. But most of them are over the age of 55. That's because they have to hold on to what they perceive as power. All of your old, as I told you, 60% of white folks ages 55 to 65 is headed to retirement age. That's 60% of white folks, okay? The vast majority of men have left the American workforce, okay? And they will continue to leave. They're going to continue to leave. They're going to continue to basically do their own thing. They're going to go out traveling. And Black men, of course, have helped, of course, to cripple the bridal industry. Men are not even getting married no more. They also basically are helping the fact that since there is not enough workers, that businesses have to shut down certain types of stores. You'll see that Target and Walmart and other stores are going to start closing more of their stores. Other stores that's going to close down, that is never to return to America again. Because here's the thing. See, Black folks who basically have been the backbone of America has shaped this country to be stabled as it is right now. That's the reason why your illegal immigrants who basically failed in their own countries don't have that power. Okay, they are not like the black man who's been working with the white man to stabilize an economy and stabilize a specific country. It's all chaotic in Mexico and other parts of Latin America and other parts. But the black man still holds the title of stabilizing and helping the white man stabilize his economic system in this country. Okay? And so other people have looked at that and said, oh, we can do the same thing. And that's the reason why they formed the BRIC nations using their own money and currency, you see. People now is also specifically men. Men basically are getting upset and they basically are standing up against the rise against capitalism. You see? And now people are saying, well, even if you put Trump back in office, how can he and the other G7 and geopolitics nations and Europe and other parts like Japan and other Western nations stop the East, like Russia and China, from this global new economic market? They can't do it. It's too late. Jim Crow Joe in office, and with this war that he had with, support from against Russia with Ukraine, is now fueling fueling other nations to turn their back as far as trade and other types of relationship. Remember, Jim Crow Joe went over there to Saudi Arabia and tried to speak with the king, the prince there, or whatever. And he went home, came home, and Joe Biden wanted him to basically produce more oil so that the United States could basically get more oil so that this country could relax up on its gas pricing. Couldn't do it. Okay. And now you see us paying $4 and $5 almost at the pump. It's going to really get sad if this man get back in office. But his most loyal voters, these black folks that we're saying, 75% of the 17 million that voted for Joe Biden, a lot of them have fled his campaign. It's just like his black staff, like Cedric Richmond and all these other people, like Simone Sanders, all of them leaving his staff, or have left his staff, I should say. The Democratic Party is in crisis now. And so therefore, with black people, especially those who are on the grassroots, we're saying no reparations, no vote, is now basically bringing the white American the white American system to its knees. You can't have black folks out there saying no reparations, no vote. The rest of the country saying we're not fit to use your currency no more. And you got other people basically upset with the American people. You see, now you've got a whole different society now that's coming in the next 20 years. And so therefore, as my fellow colleagues in the Black Grass Media has pointed out, is that they're going to try to then re-engineer white supremacy. That you're not going to be seeing white men making decisions anymore. He has to now bring out these illegal immigrants to try to flush out black people in places. He wants to multiculturalize our black communities. Okay, white supremacy is going in a different direction. It is basically going to manifest itself in a different way into which we basically had previously, where you just white folks sitting at tables making all the decisions, but specifically the white men who have all been president of this country. And we can't say that Obama is actually the first black president, because he had the same mindset of a white man. He was just a white man trapped in a black body. Let's go ahead and read Elizabeth Martinez in the article that she's written, and I won't bore you with all of the stuff here, but she gives back the basis of white supremacy. And I quote, she says that white supremacy is an historically based, institutionally perpetrated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of color, white people, and the nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. And what does that system mean? She says, the most common mistake people make when talking about racism and white supremacy is to think of it as a problem of personal prejudice and individual acts of discrimination. They do not see that it is a system, a web of interlocking, reinforcing institutions, political, economic, social, cultural, legal, military, educational, all of our institutions. As a system, racism affects every aspect of the life of this country. You see? And this is the reason why we've been telling the old civil rights generation that to hell with the white man's jobs. We don't want his jobs. We are owed reparations. And so now the cry out from this new Black grassroots generation now is to replace the situation of wanting and demanding jobs to wanting and demanding businesses and reparations. This is the reason why the next election for 2024 would be reparations or no vote. If there's no reparations, no vote. We would do a protest vote. The protest vote will then go to the Republican, if whoever the nominee is, and I'm thinking that it's going to be Donald Trump who is going to defeat Jim Crow Joe Biden again, or come back to defeat him rather. I don't think he lost specifically in the first place, but let's see what happens in 2024. Now, the system of white supremacy is now being threatened, though. You see, here's the thing. We can't applaud the Chinese for basically standing up to white supremacy because they can also enslave us too. Amos Wilson taught us that we have to be very, very careful into praising the Chinese. And that's what they're doing in Africa. The Chinese, of course, have been buying up debt from the African nations. And so therefore, the Chinese can put us in an economic slavery, while the European has placed us or did place us in chattel slavery and has not basically paid the debt that is owed to American descendants of slaves. So we have to be very careful what the Chinese are doing because, like we said earlier, a lot of these people, of course, if we're not careful, they're putting a different face on what it means of white power. A black face on white power, like Obama, did not work. So now what you have to do is you got to bring these illegal immigrants and you got to flood them into these black communities. And so that is now the new white supremacy in the world. And so now instead of a white person talking about, yeah, you niggers, y'all don't deserve no reparations, you're going to have Hispanics and Asians and others saying the same thing out of their mouth that the white supremacists once said, redefining what white supremacy is in the coming world order. And this is what is going on in the American politics today. If the 2024 election means that we put another Republican back in office, what does it mean for us to basically look at that pressure and to see, well, these Republicans, they hate us, they can't stand our guts either. But yet, like I said earlier, it is putting us in the pressure to do something collectively as black folks. All sitting around here talking about the love for Jesus and all that, it's not going to do nothing for us. Okay. And so what we have been saying all along is that there needs to be an alternative financial and economic system for the Black community, and reparations is the only key. Now, before I came on, and I'm almost here, finished here in a minute. Before I came on, I was looking at that fake reparation debate that they put on Capitol Hill in 2009. And if you go back there and look at that hearing, and I'm not going to bore you with going over the entire hearing because I was even falling asleep, even having to sit there for almost, 2 or 3 hours to even listen to the crowd. But one of the things that they had, I don't know where they found this Coleman Hughes dude at. Okay, remember we talked about him specifically right after they had this so-called hearing. And one of the biggest problems that we had is that these immigrants from the Caribbean and Jamaica and all these other people who have came over here who is not really entitled to our reparations are speaking for us. A lot of the Black folks in the Congressional Black Caucus are have immigrant backgrounds who say, you niggas, y'all don't need no reparations. They have been sounding like white people too. So we have to understand that no reparations, no vote is now the political cry for the Black men and Black women in America right now. And so we're not fit to go out there talking about no jobs or no justice anymore. We're not going to be holding those signs anymore like the old civil rights generation has done. No. The politics is changing and it's going to form, and the younger generation is going to be inclined to really step their game up into a different fashion than that of the old civil rights generation, and of course what our ancestors have went through as well. Now, speaking of ancestors, these good white folks not only do not want to pay us our reparations, but they are basically, it's going to say, when we talk there about no reparations, no vote, they say, well, all of these people are dead. Okay, that's what white folks always say. Those people are dead. Well, their strategy has been, the whole strategy has been what? Is to ignore basically the repairing of Black people. Okay. And so we know that the Japanese and all these other people, the Jewish people and all those folks, they got their reparations, especially during World War II when the Japanese had gotten their reparations during their when they was having to spend time in the internment camps. Okay. And speaking of, the repairing of the damage, you see, now we have to deal with these illegal immigrants now. We have to deal with other groups, of course, because white folks keep on piling these people up in our neighborhoods now. Mm-hmm. And so now in Chicago and other places, these good white folks are saying that we're going to take this school, we're going to take this business, we're going to then allocate $51 million to these illegal immigrants. Okay? And these illegal immigrants are not migrants. They're not asylum seekers, okay? They're not asylum seekers. We have to basically really understand what asylum means when you're talking about migrating to another country. There has not been nobody in Mexico and other parts of Latin America who has threatened these migrants and they have to seek asylum in another nation like you do, let's say a head of state or some politician that had to go into exile and then have to then seek asylum in order to then go to another nation so they can be protected of all the other people or the military or whoever, the terrorists or whoever is after them in their own country. This is not the definition of asylum, okay? That, what I just described, is the definition of asylum. So these are not asylum seekers. These are illegal immigrants who's coming over here to our country where Black folks build and demanding that they get paid $35 an hour and then the hard works and backs of Black people who have built this country. As this article had pointed out, that before in the 1960s, as I should say, that in 1965, when we basically got the civil rights legislation in 1964, and in 1965, when we got the Voting Rights Act, white people then decided that they were going to pass an immigrant legislation. At that time, we only had 9.2 million immigrants in America. Today, we have over 40 million immigrants in America. These folks who have abandoned their own economies to come and basically cut in front of the Black man and Black woman whose ancestors fought and died, and not only in the Civil War, but in other wars as well. And this is the reason why we're pushing back. No longer could we support these illegal immigrants, because after they come over here and get citizenship, they come over here with anti-Black hatred and racism towards us. They come over here sound like these good white supremacists that we have to deal with. And that's the reason, as most of our Black content creators are pointing out, is that we do better under Republicans because at least we know who the racist is, because they're going to bring direct racism towards you. When the Democrats in office, we got to deal with every group. We got to deal with the LGBT community. We got to deal with the gay Black community, or the gay community in general. Then we have to turn around and deal with these white supremacists. Then when the Democrats is in office, we have to deal with their shuffling, jiving, and symbolicalism. Then we have to deal with all of these other groups, the Hispanics, Latinos, all of these people who are basically, are all against us. When the Democrats are in office, we don't have to face that necessarily when the Republicans in office. All we have to do is deal with their direct racism. And that's the reason why, Trump 2024. And build a wall. I'm with those people, those Black people in Chicago. But what was it that it took you so long to see that the Democrats ain't done a damn thing for you? We just don't know. Speaking of white supremacy here, it says here again, moving on, by not understanding that racism is systematic, we guarantee it will continue. For example, racist police behavior is often reduced to a bad apples who needs to be removed, instead of seeing that it can be found in the police departments and everywhere. It reflects and sustain the existing power relations throughout society. This mistake has real consequences by refusing to see police brutality as a part of a system and that the system must be changed. We guarantee such brutality will continue. You see, the need to recognize racism as being systematic is one reason the term white supremacy is more useful than the term racism. They refer to the same problem, but the purpose of racism is much clearer when we call it white supremacy. The word supremacy means a power relationship exists. B, race is unsympathetic terms for a difference between people. Although racism is a social reality, it has no biological or other scientific basis. There is a single human race. It's what, of course, but that has changed when we look at white supremacy as a whole. And then, of course, C, it says the term racism often leads to dead-end debates about whether a particular remark of action by an individual person was really racist or not. We will achieve a clearer understanding of racism if we analyze how a certain action relates to the system of white supremacy. Now, here's the problem that we have to talk about with these good white folks, okay, is that, they always tell you, well, it's getting better out here, and it's getting better. Listen, we always have to say and often say that it is not up to the perpetrators to tell us as the victims of what is getting better for us. That decision has to be made by us as Black people. ourselves. So if we're going to then keep or maintain and make sure that we don't care about voting in the 2024 election, hey, then let's do a protest vote. If you think the Democrats is going to be the man or the woman of their word, you put Jim Crow Joe and Kamala Harris back in office, hey, you get what you vote for. I'm Lawyer Henderson, and I approve that message. If you have not subscribed to the Lawyers and Podcast Show, make sure you do so. We'll come back to tell you about our schedule when we come back. Thanks for watching.